Community Hangout Show and Tell. This is our second show and tell since we started it. It is Friday, September 20th, 10:01 p.m. It was 01 before I said that. Friday, September 20th, 10:01 p.m. Go away. Tonight we have a pretty cool selection of presenters, some that are bringing projects to Earth, others that may or may not be at Earth. I'm not sure if everybody's going to be there or not this time. We've got things from the Marlin firmware editions that are hopefully coming to a printer near you. We have a Tinkercad expert in the room, a photogrammetry expert, and a printer kit manufacturing expert tonight with us. So let's not delay this any further. We'll go through our intros for the co-hosts and go right to our first presenter. So tonight we've got Sean. Sean, go ahead and tell everybody who you are and where they can find you.
What's up, everybody? My name is Sean. If you don't know me, you can find me at ArtMods or ArtMods Official on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can also find me at PoPoly. I am the community manager for PoPoly as well. So you can find me everywhere, I guess. Yeah.
All right. Next up, we've got Martin.
Yeah, hi. I'm Martin. I'm from Iceland and have a channel called 3DP Iceland. I'm on Twitter as well as 3DP Iceland. And I do a lot of stuff on my channel, 3D printing, landscapes, painting, characters, Star Wars stuff. Just gonna show you quick close-up. This is a Millennium Falcon I'm doing, and that was a Benzie on top, so it's huge. And I'm doing printer upgrades and videos and all sorts of stuff. So that's me.
Okay, thanks, Martin. So that brings it back to me. I'm Matt from How I Do It and the organizer and founder, if you want to call it that, of F3DPCH. Just a real quick for the beginning of the stream, the next Friday night 3D printing community hangout will be on October 4th at 10 p.m. We're working on a guest for that one right now, so we don't have a topic yet, but we will before then. The next show and tell show will be October 18th at 10 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to be one of the presenters coming on the show and tell, go to f3dpch.com/show and tell. And you can do show-and-tell or just show and tell. Fill out that form and you can pick on there which date you'd like to sign up for. So you can even sign up November, December if you don't want to present in October. The things we're looking for is if you've got a work in progress, if you have a finished product or finished project, products that you may be selling, techniques that you have for 3D modeling, 3D printing that you want to show off and share with the world. Basically, all that we ask is that whatever it is you're presenting, in some way, use 3D printing to get to where it is or the final product. Doesn't even have to have 3D printing in the final product. We just want to see what you're using 3D printing for and show that off to the community. And this is a cool way as well for the community to learn about other people who share a same interest in 3D printing. So with that said, let's go right to our first presenter. And this is one that I'm really excited personally to get to see in a couple of weeks down at the East Coast Rep Rap Festival on October 12th and 13th. And that would be Aaron from TD3D Studios. Aaron, go ahead and tell us about yourself, who you are, and what it is that you're up to.
All right. Yeah, my name is Aaron, and I'm with a new company I'm creating, Twisted Dimensions 3D Studios, or abbreviated TD3D Studios. You can find me on Twitter at TD3D Studios is my Twitter handle. I also have a website. It's td3d.cool, COOL. But yeah, as Matt said, I've been working on a project. I have created a Raspberry Pi based scanner. It's a human-sized 3D scanner that can take a 3D scan of a person, basically in one shot, It has 100 cameras on it, 100 Raspberry Pi based cameras on the unit. I've actually got one here that I'll talk about here in just a minute, what makes it up. But just to give you a little bit of history, I'm kind of new to the community. I bought my first 3D scanner, I think 3 years ago, and haven't looked back since. So yeah, I went to IRF actually last year. Was at IRF. Went to that was kind of my first taste of the more community around 3D printing, and then went to MRF earlier this year, and of course I'll be at IRF here in 3 weeks, and I'll be bringing my scanner with me and actually doing scans of people that are there at IRF. Actually, if Matt, if I can share something here from my screen.
Yep, go for it. Down at the bottom center.
Yep.
Right. And there you go.
All right. Yeah, so this is actually just a rendering of what the scan rig looks like. So it's comprised of a ring around the a base here. It's actually made out of wood, and then there are 20 poles around this ring, and then each pole holds 5 of these individual scan units. These scan units are basically a Raspberry Pi with a camera running a custom image that I flashed to the SD card, and then I have written some application that runs on the PC that actually controls these scanners, or the Pi units. There's also LED lighting. That's what I'll show a live picture of the unit here in just a minute, an actual picture. It's just easier to show the whole rig here in the rendering. But there's actually LED light strips spaced around it to provide a nice even lighting around the subject, do away with any kind of shadows or anything that may pop up. And then to get in and out of the rig, there's actually one pole here in the middle is actually hinged to the next one beside it, and will actually swing open like a door. So you can actually, the subject can actually get in and out of the circle there easily. Let me go to my other image here.
While you're bringing that up, Aaron, there's kind of a question in the chat a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Terry asked, so the idea is no need to move the target or the camera, a large single device that takes all the images at once, correct?
Yeah, correct. So when I was looking at doing this, of course, most people are familiar, at least probably seen some type of 3D scanning before, but for small or inanimate objects, you can obviously have the first 3D scanner I ever had was a small unit that was had a small turntable, had a camera, a couple lasers that shined onto the object as it rotated around on the turntable, and created that. And that worked for small objects. Obviously, for a larger object, you can take one or more cameras and walk around the object, but you still have to have remain fairly still. One of the target markets that I'm going to look at is actually doing scans of youth sports. So getting a kid to stand still and motionless while you move the cameras around it wasn't exactly feasible. So that's why I went with the option of having the multiple cameras. So basically, with a click of a button, basically instantly I'm taking 100 images around that, from all angles around that subject. So there's no need for them to remain still or motionless. And of course, with the adequate LED lighting around it, I can use quick enough shutter speeds and stuff. That's basically, it's like taking a quick snapshot of somebody, a quick photo.
Cool.
So this other image I called up, this is the actual unit itself. It's kind of crammed into a small office space right now, so it's kind of hard for me to get a picture of the whole thing. But basically, this is what the actual unit looks like. The base is made out of wood. I'm using some different aluminum extrusions, mostly 2020 aluminum extrusions for the poles. And then everything you see in there that's yellow, that's all 3D printed. Those are all parts I designed and 3D printed. The unit, because I wanted to be able to take this unit around, I needed something that would be somewhat mobile. So the unit, the rig is fairly easily disassembled. So each of the scan units, there's a clip that's actually permanently screwed to the lumen extrusion, but each of the scan units just basically pops off. There's a Cat5 cable run to it. Unplug the Cat5 cable, the scan unit will pop off. All those pack away into the boxes you see back there in the corners. The poles actually just pull right out of the base units. The poles pull out. They all kind of bundle together in a nice little bundle. I'll throw some straps around. And then the bases themselves, even that circle along the bottom, switch back over to my other picture. I might be able to tell on it. I can't really, but it's actually in 10 different sections, and there's a little quick release that you twist 90 degrees and pull a little pin out, and each of the wood pieces here break apart into 10 different pieces. And even those little yellow bases at the bottom, they'll actually twist and come off of the wood, so it all kind of packs together, and fits inside my vehicle pretty easily. All right, let me stop sharing my screen here and come back to the camera. Oh, there we go. So this is what the individual scan units look like. Like I said, there's 100 of these on the unit. It is comprised mainly of 3 main components. You have the Raspberry Pi, either a 3D Plus or in some cases 4. I think this one's actually this one's actually a 4. You got the Raspberry Pi camera, and a PoE module. Using the PoE module, that allows me to run one cable to each unit, basically run a network cable to it, and that provides power as well as the communication. The camera itself, there's a little wing nut here that I can loosen up to adjust the angle. But basically, each unit slides onto the little clip that's on the base, and then the ones that are up higher, I can actually adjust the camera to point down a little bit if I need to. But yeah, mount those 5 of these onto each of those poles, run a network cable to each one that comes back to a PoE switch for power. And that's basically what the individual scan units look like. Like I said, I run a little custom image I've created, running some scripts and things that I've written that are flashed to the card, and then it's all controlled by a PC with some application software that I've written there that allows me to adjust the settings for the camera, preview images, and actually take the scan. Once I've taken the scan, I can actually preview up to 9 of the cameras. When I hit the scan button, it actually will display 9 of the images on the screen, so I can look at it, make sure everything looks good. Then another button, hit the download. It downloads all the images from the scan units to a disk array that I've got, a little SAN disk array. And then I can take that and run it through the photogrammetry software to actually create the model. So it's talking about some of the decision or the design decisions I made there. Like I mentioned, one of the reasons I kind of got into this is I've got 3 young kids that are in youth sports, and I was looking at all the money that I sink into anybody that has kids, in particularly in sports. You can sink a lot of money into pictures for these kids. So I thought, well, I want to take a step farther and go out to these teams and actually, instead of just offering up, pictures, I can start offering anything from a 3D picture all the way to, actual printed figurines and so forth of the kids. So so that's why I wanted something that was going to be portable, that I could pack around and actually take on site to a baseball field and set it up and run the scans of the kids.
I bet there'll be a lot of Heisman poses, huh?
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that's actually one of my kids plays football, and he's been one of my test subjects for it. And of course, that was the first thing he wanted to do was a Heisman pose.
So Carl asks, is there a lot of bend in the side since the top isn't braced, or is there a top braced?
Well, if there's not. I actually have. There's a couple top braces. I've actually got the one where the hinges are. It's actually braced all the way across long ways, as well as to the one beside it. So I do have a couple of top braces, mainly just for the hinge unit. But no, there's not a lot of bend in any of the rest of it.
Then we had a question from a couple questions from Mr. Butchram in the chat. So every camera has a he said TAD Pi attached. I think he means just a Raspberry Pi attached. And then he also asked, how much does the rig cost?
Probably, I mean, I know when I was kind of budgeting out and started planning it, it's roughly in the 10 grand range, somewhere close to that. I don't know the exact figure, but it's close enough to the $10,000 range.
Wow. Yeah, I was just adding up the Pi cameras and the Raspberry Pis by themselves.
Yeah, I think, and that's of course the biggest expense. And I do believe that one of these units, basically, when I added up, the camera, the Pi, the PoE unit, the SD card, this was somewhere around the $70 range.
Yep.
For one of these. So you're basically talking about in just the Pi hardware, you're talking about close to $7,000.
Now, which Raspberry Pis, and you might have answered that, which Raspberry Pi are you using?
Most of them are the 3B Plus. When the 4 came out, I did start picking up a few 4s, but the 3B Plus, and only the only reason I went with 3B Plus was for the PoE. Actually, I went through several before I finalized the design. I went through several prototypes, and in the earlier prototypes, I was using a 3, and I was actually I had kind of manually did a little bit of PoE. So what I was doing was I actually had a network cable run to one, and I was splitting out the pairs that weren't used for the Ethernet and soldering on a USB connector on the remote end. So it split out, plugged into the Pi for Ethernet, and then a couple pairs came out and plugged into the USB for power. But then when the 3B Plus came out and could do PoE, I actually started using the 3B Plus and doing the true PoE to it. That cut down on the manual labor of making those wires up quite a bit.
Right. Techie Dad asked, is there any info on the PoE module? He needs some of those.
Oh, yeah. Actually, if you just go to Adafruit, it's sold by Adafruit. If you go to Adafruit and search for PoE, there's a number of things that come up, but there's 2 modules. One does 1.5 amps, and the other one does I think it's 1.8 amps. There's not a lot of amperage needed for this. The Pi itself and the camera draw very little amperage. You really don't start needing to get up into like the higher amperage on the Pis until you start using a lot of USB accessories. So since I'm not running USB accessories, I just opted for the 1.5 amp PoE module, which is plenty of power. And the reason I went with this one, it's like $7, I think, versus the official Raspberry Pi PoE had is like $20. Where this provides adequate power, and it was like $7. So.
Okay. Mr. Butcherman asked, how long does it take to set up and tear down the rig?
I haven't done it with all of the Pis yet. I just actually last week added the final 15 units, but the last time I set it up, I had like 60 or 70 units when I actually had tore it down and set it up and moved it to its current home. It's roughly about an hour is what it's going to take me to set it up and tear it down. Really the most tedious and time consuming part is the wiring, just to try to make it look halfway decent, halfway nice. But yeah, I can set up and tear it down in roughly an hour.
All right. And then one more question from the chat. Mike NLTMW asked how long does the image processing take once you take all the pictures to actually process that into a 3D model?
Yeah, I can actually go from the images to the 3D model in about 15 minutes. Now there are some artifacts that pop up in there that require a little bit of processing after that, and that 15 minutes is you kind of start the process up and walk away. But yeah, about 15 minutes with my hardware that I'm running right now is how long it takes to actually create that model. Then I got to go into a program like ZBrush and kind of clean up a few artifacts and things here and there. So that just depends on how clean of the initial model or image is. But it takes about 15 minutes for me to generate the 3D model from the images.
All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Martin.
So I have a question from myself. When you create the imagery on the model and all the photoscan files and the exported image, how big of a data set is per model you create?
That's a good question. I don't know right off. I don't have any handy for me to look, so
Yeah, okay,
I'm not
no
real sure.
problem. Yeah, cool.
What so you're running all the Raspberry Pis power over Ethernet
Yep.
back to a computer. You're running your own mini network there.
Correct. Yep.
Can you go into specifics on how or more detail on how you actually initiate the image capture?
Yep.
Is it all custom software that does that, or like?
Yes, it is. It's all custom software. Yep. So it's actually a Windows application running on the PC, and that mainly because that's where my background is originally, was with software development, Windows software development. But the Pis themselves are running. It's a combination of some shell scripting as well as some Python code that's running on the Pi. But basically, that's running on there, and it's listing for some network broadcast. And from the PC side of things, I can go in and basically fill in some information for that scan, like the person's name and things like that. But basically, I use that software to send commands, and it's basically broadcasting out a broadcast on the network that will contain potentially it basically contains an address in it that's either going to be all, or it's going to be a list of so each of the scanners, just let me back up here for a second. Each of the scanners is numbered. So when this scanner boots up, of course, I've got it physically numbered here, but when it, the only thing that's custom on this SD card, other than, all it's running the same image, but there's basically I go in and tell it what unit number it is. So it's got this 3-digit unit number. So basically on the Windows side, when I send a command, I'm either sending one or more of these ID numbers, or just a broadcast to all. But basically, that script, when it gets the network packets, it looks at it, see if it's intended either for all units or its specific unit number, and then it performs the command that it's given. So the command could be anything from rebooting the unit to shutting it down to taking a preview image to actually initiating the scan. Actually, I do some lighting control as well. I'm not using this quite yet, but the next, I guess the next iteration of this, or my future additions to this, is going to be doing a multi, like 2 sets of images. One image set that will be for the textures and the color, and the second image set that will actually be using projecting a noisy pattern onto the subject to help with the actual rendering of the 3D object. They'll kind of be done almost simultaneously, or just real quick. But what I want to do is I want to be able to cut the LED lighting off, project the pattern onto the subject. So there's a handful of these units that are actually connected to the LED lighting to control that lighting. So again, that script on all these units has it's also listening for commands to control that lighting, to either dim it or shut the lighting off. So basically it's sending a network broadcast over the network that has a command, and it's either addressed to a particular unit or all of the units. And then the scripting that's running on the units, when it receives that packet, it performs whatever commands it's given.
I wonder if something, just kind of thinking about this, like something like the Pico projectors
Mm-hmm.
be of use, like because you have the Raspberry Pi and you have the horsepower you have the video output from the Raspberry Pi. If you could have, you wouldn't need 100 of them. You wouldn't need one for every Raspberry Pi, but if you had them kind of staggered different places, projecting a pattern, I guess the only problem would be as your subject size changes, the overlap's going to change.
Right.
Thinking about that.
So is it a flash, like in photography, how you have a flash and it'll project the light for a split second as it takes the photo? So does it do that like all at once, or is it like constant light?
Right now it's constant light. I mean, theoretically, I could flash it. That I haven't played enough around with the timing to see if I could actually get the timing right of having the Pi actually turn the LEDs on, make sure they're on, and before it takes the image. So basically, right now it's constant. So my idea right now with the projection would be constant light, takes the first image, shuts the lights off, does the projection, and takes the second image. But yeah, right now without the projection, it's just constant light.
Okay.
Another question from the chat. This one is from Ryan, Geek Tech. Will you be printing printing out anything to help with your wire management further?
I may. I do have on the rig right now. There are some clips that go down the extrusion that basically allows me to Velcro the wiring as it runs down the poles. I can Velcro it to that. What I've kind of played around with a couple ideas on the so basically on each side of the rig is a little custom made stand that I've got that's holding a number of PoE switches on each side. It's kind of split. And I've kind of toyed around with a couple of things there where I could take the excess wiring and roll it, around it or something to kind of hold the excess wiring. Honestly, if I could, I should have got a picture of the front side from the one picture I was showing earlier. The back side of it, where it's at right now, the wiring is very messy. The front side looks much better. My problem is that room that it's in right now is so small that I couldn't really get around to the back side of it to manage the wire as well as I would have liked. So it's kind of thrown back there a little bit. But the front side that I could actually access is much cleaner looking than what it looks in the picture.
Okay. And then another one from the chat. This one's from Carl, NAC3D Designs. What output format will we be getting at ERF? STL, STEP, F3D?
Okay.
OBJ?
Well, it's actually an OBJ file.
Okay.
Now, and just to clarify, I won't what my plan is I'm going to be doing the scans at ERF, but because of the anticipated number of scans I'm going to be doing and the time it takes to process these scans, most likely I won't be handing any out at ERF. I'll probably be, most of my time I think is going to be taken up there just doing the scans. So a lot of that process is going to take place after I come back, and I will be sending those out afterwards.
Okay. And I don't want to keep everybody else waiting. If there are more questions for Aaron, and I kind of personally would like to come back to Aaron after we go through the presenters. But for now, Aaron, as far as at ERF, just a couple real quick questions. Best, if somebody's coming to ERF and they're hoping to get a full body scan done, best kind of close, any recommendations on what people should wear or not wear for the scan?
I mean, if just as nothing that's like I won't say solid color, but if you wore all white or all black, that's probably the worst thing you could do. Anything else that's not like a solid white or solid black that's pretty decent.
Okay.
Solid white's not as bad. The black's the worst thing. Solid black's probably the worst, but solid white would be probably second worst. But anything else does pretty good.
Neutral gray, right? gray skin paint. As far as at ERF, is there any cost with getting the full body scan at ERF?
Right. So what I'm planning on doing is not charging anything there up front. I plan on doing the scans. Anybody that wants it, then sending out. Basically, once it's done, I'm going to send out and say, hey, here's your results. If you like that, I'd appreciate anything you want to pay. But I was looking at like $15 for a scan, but it's not paid up front. It's basically after the fact if you're happy with the results.
Okay. Is there anywhere people can follow your project and kind of keep up to date with what you're doing, changes you're making? Maybe if they want to build their own rig, plans that they can find maybe?
Yeah, the best place right now is just to follow me on Twitter. It's at TD3D Studios. I haven't been super active on there yet because most of my time has been spent kind of fine tuning some of the software and getting things ready for ERF. But that's really the best place is to follow me on Twitter. Okay.
And for anybody that's interested but didn't catch his Twitter handle, it is in the bottom left corner of his screen. It's also down in the description below as well. So, Aaron, I think we're going to come back to you again to keep going with more questions and stuff, because I know my mind's just racing with questions. Your rig's really interesting. Okay, so thank you, Aaron. Next up, let's go over to let's do Maker Jake. Jake, go ahead and tell everybody who you are, what you do, and where they can find you.
Hello, my name's Maker Jake. That's where you can find me on most platforms. You can find my YouTube channel, youtube.com/MakerJake. And I do 3D printing tutorials. and I also just 3D print for fun. Now, I tend to mostly use Tinkercad, and I'm a member of the Tinkercad advisory team.
And you are the youngest member of the Tinkercad advisory team.
Yeah.
So what kind of stuff are you doing with Tinkercad, Jake? I know you've got some examples that you'd like to show off and talk a little bit about what you do with Tinkercad. And for those in the chat, if you like what you're seeing with Jake, we are considering bringing Jake on the show and tell on a regular basis, possibly, or a semi-regular basis to show off Tinkercad tips and tricks. So let us know in the chat if you like what he's up to.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I had a booth at a maker fair, and so I had some business cards, but I didn't really have a good way of handing them out. So then I decided to design and print this nice little business card holder that I've been using for a couple years now. And this was all done in Tinkercad. You can kind of see some of the primitive shapes in there along the edges. And then I've also made some pins. Like this was using Tinkercad code blocks, which is really good for doing symmetrical designs, because then you can rotate everything around them. I've made baskets. This one was also in code blocks, and I have a tutorial on my YouTube channel if you want to learn how to do this in Tinkercad. And one of my favorite prints from Tinkercad are my Hershey's miniature dispensers. So this is just a normal version, and like you fill them up in the top, and then you can just pull it out through the bottom, and it's held up for a couple of years now. And then there's this other one that has a firing mechanism, so you can actually shoot out chocolates.
Don't bring that one to Earth and show my daughters, Jake.
I've also designed toys in Tinkercad and then dual extruded printed them. So I made this race car, and the wheels move using a metal axle. And all of this was done in Tinkercad. Most people think that Tinkercad's a very limited software, but they're using some more advanced techniques and just spending a lot of time on it. You can get like smoother designs that look more like real life, and that you could, while you could do it in Fusion, there are a lot more steps to just get started instead of just pulling in a cube, changing the sizes for it, and then messing with it. Now, one of my favorite tools is a smart duplicate tool. So that's how I made this 3D printed pumpkin, by just taking a bunch of like cylinders or spheres that were then stretched, and then by duplicating it once, rotating it a certain amount, and I can just repeatedly hit Control-D to get the whole exterior done. My 3D printed derby car, I'm going to try to keep that confidential until the race day.
You saw Vicky's question?
Yeah. And then this is some 3D printed armor that I made in Tinkercad a couple of years ago for another maker fair. Then you can kind of still see some of the lines that are Tinkercad's like kind of go-to. And then these printed change, and they still stay together incredibly well. Now, my most favorite design, which made me become a Tinker Star, is this house that I designed completely in Tinkercad and then got it printed in from Shapeways SLS, where you kind of can't really see it in the camera, but you can see that there are like little windows everywhere and some incredibly fine detail. And I did all of this in Tinkercad without any other software.
You've got the chat wild right now, Jake. Terry said very cool. Chris Gulata said, I feel so dumb now. 4C, yeah. I'm not going to try to announce that one. Impressive, Jake. You do it said, no wonder Jake is the official Tinkercad advisory team member. And Vicky said that it makes sense about your derby car and keeping it confidential. So you mentioned with a couple of those that you did it a couple years ago. How long have you been using Tinkercad?
Tinkercad was actually the first 3D printing software that I ever used. And I started 3D printing around 4 to 5 years ago, depending on how you count years.
All right. What got you started with Tinkercad? Just kind of the simplicity of it and sort of the building block side of things? Is that what drove you towards using that?
Yeah, because there's a local makerspace had opened up around where I lived, and so then I went there over the weekend and took a 3D printing class because it sounded interesting, because it really is. And then the first thing was Tinkercad, and it was like the simplest for kids and just anyone to start out with, because it's very, very intuitive of like taking blocks, subtracting them, and then adding more parts to it. And then eventually I just kept using it and practicing it because I had just so much fun with it. And then I've at the place where I am now.
Very cool. If you were talking to a teacher who's trying to learn how to use 3D printing in their classroom, and if you were going to suggest Tinkercad to them, what's some of the examples you would use for a teacher, like for your grade or grades lower than you, that you've got younger kids that are just learning how to do this kind of stuff? What kind of things would you tell them you'd like to see them do?
One of my first couple things is I made this like little 3D printed observatory, because this kind of like architecture I think is easier because it's most people have been there and kind of know what it is, and it can be pretty simple, but then it can also be taken to a very extreme level, so you can kind of start at like the very beginner house and then go all the way up to the house that I designed.
Okay, so having them start out with like some kind of simple projects using more of the basic shapes. And cool.
Yeah.
That's something with my daughters in elementary school, or my oldest daughter in elementary school and my youngest daughter eventually being there. I want to see more use of technology in the classroom. And that's the biggest challenge talking with like the elementary school teachers. They want to bring 3D printing in, but they're not sure how. From somebody who's been doing it for a couple of years now, using Tinkercad, designing their own stuff and printing their own stuff, I just thought it'd be interesting to see what you had to say on that. Do you guys get to do any kind of 3D printing and modeling?
So the school year started, and I actually started at a new school, and I haven't been able to do anything like that yet. However, at my previous school, where I actually trained some of the teachers on how to use Tinkercad, we have done like little exercises. One of the most recent ones was making cells in Tinkercad to then print out, to kind of more understand how the different stages of mitosis with like all the organelle splitting. And but then I remember in 6th grade we did attempting to design a knee brace in Tinkercad, then printing it out and trying to test to see how well it actually worked. And I really liked that because then I got more of a better understanding of how like the actual things would work how the knee brace would work normally in real life, and then trying to transfer that into my own design.
Okay. Paul, I know you were interested. Feel free to.
Yeah, my question is kind of based around how you learned Tinkercad. Did you feel like as you were getting into it that were you just playing around and figuring things out, or did you have projects that you were trying to do that helped you like learn the various techniques?
I mostly did kind of messing around with it, because then sometimes I wouldn't really have a necessarily like a project that I'm going for. I would kind of just like pull things and say, you know what, I kind of feel like making a house, and then try to make that and use like all the different tools to then more master it. And then that's when I started getting into like more doing projects like my candy dispenser. So then like once I had known how to do it, when like a problem would arise, I then knew exactly what I needed to do to transfer that design to then 3D print it.
Hey Jake, you've got some sweet looking models there. Can you talk a little bit more about the code blocks and how you made that basket? That's not a Tinkercad function I've used before.
Yeah, so code blocks is relatively new. At this point, it's been out for a couple months, but it's kind of a scratched based system. So then you can see kind of these individual parts that then go up, then curve, then go back down. These are just hexagons. You can kind of see it if you look at they're just the right angle. That where then you import them, you can tell it the dimensions, then you can add holes in a very kind of like scratch blocks that you can drag and drop in them, and then tell it to rotate it. Then like you can get it to repeat a certain number of times, then group it, and like all these commands you can change the colors for it. It's really fun.
So the code blocks is based on Scratch programming, more or less.
Yeah.
Okay. That's that's something I have not looked at all on Tinkercad, because every now and then I'll use Tinkercad to do something, and I know code blocks was there, but I never really, when I try to do something like your basket, that's where I'll end up in Fusion to do something. I'll have to play with that. I think my daughter might like the code blocks, being able to drag the code around and link things together. That might be something neat to play with. Mr. Butcherham asked in the chat, what does being on the advisory board entail? And will we ever see a fillet chamfer fillet and chamfer setting in Tinkercad?
So being on the board entails there are conference calls that I'll join in with, and then we basically talk to some of the devs at Tinkercad and explain like how we're using it, what new features we'd like to see, what we think's in like going in a good direction, what's going in bad, and like making more disseminating information about it. Like and then I have been asking them to make a fillet or / a chamfer tool, but it takes some time to like actually code that in, and they're already have like stuff that they're working on, so we might see it, but I can't guarantee anything.
I guess a fillet and a chamfer you could do in the code blocks.
Yeah, you can also do it in the normal design editor. Like on this, I chamfered the bottom part of it just by pulling in the roof piece and then angling and turning it into a hole, and then just subtracting it from the main body. So it is currently possible to do fillets and chamfers. It's just not as easy as just in Fusion, where you just click a tool, click an edge, and pull it out.
Hey, there's Chuck in the chat. He said you can also. Oh, okay. I'll get to that one in a second. Mr. Butcherham asked again in the chat if you have any code block tutorials on your YouTube channel.
I actually do. I made one a couple months ago at once I had more learned about it, and then decided to mess with it. And it is the exact code that I use to make these baskets, and I think it's a lot more helpful to actually see the blocks being put together.
Yeah, so, Vicky just posted a link to your video in the chat for anybody who's interested for the code blocks tutorial. Martin, Sean, you guys have anything?
Yeah, I have one question. Like on the advisory board, how many people are there, and are they having many kids as well on it?
There, from what I know and all the chats that I've been on, there are only 2 kids that are on the advisory board.
If somebody, this is probably something that you can answer, being on the advisory board. If there is something that somebody wants to have added into Tinkercad, what's the best way that they can go about making that recommendation? Should they recommend it to an advisory team member, or should they send it to Tinkercad? Like, what's kind of their best route to go about for that?
I'm not 100% sure about this, but you could definitely always talk to one of the members on the board, or just like directly message Autodesk and the devs at Tinkercad if you have a new suggestion. Yeah, that's probably how I would go about it, but I'm not exactly sure on the best route to get something added if you wanted it.
Okay. So it probably isn't a bad idea to talk to the advisory members. Chuck Hellebuck's in the chat as well from F3D Printing. He's one of the advisory members. Jake is. Jake, who else is on the advisory panel?
So there's a more in-depth post on their. There was a blog post when they were all first announced. I can put that in the chat.
All right.
But
Aaron, if you have any questions, give me like a thumbs up or post it in the private chat. If you come up with any questions for Jake that you'd like to ask, I'll bring you back in. Sorry.
But there are a lot of teachers that are in it. They kind of have it in like three more like separate teams, where you have like the more educator team, and like there's the maker team doing it. Like some I know, Claude Caputi, like Crash Rocks on YouTube. He makes a lot of the stuff in Tinkercad where it's like the gradients on an object, even though there's not necessarily a tool for that. And he makes a lot of really cool designs that amaze me just how crazy they look.
Jake, tell everybody one more time where they can find your YouTube channel. Everybody in the chat, there's 38 of you watching. If you're not subscribed to Jake, go subscribe to Jake.
So you can find me just at youtube.com//makerjake, all one word, no caps, no spaces.
Okay. Does anybody have any more questions for Jake on the panel or the presenters? Any of you guys? Paul, I didn't know if you had any more to go on or not.
The only other thing that I wanted to ask was kind of along the same lines of my other question, though, was how did you get into making in the first place? I mean, was it you said that you had a makerspace show up and that they were giving some lessons? Was that what got you into it, or did you have something that you wanted to do and that's why you took the class?
I think what first really got me started in it was my dad taught me how to solder, and then I'd go to Radio Shack and do those little like they had the kits from Velleman where you like it came with the board and all the parts, then I'd solder that all together. And then the makerspace actually did also do electronic projects, which kind of got my foot in the door of being there. And then I kind of started doing the 3D printing there, and then it kind of all snowballed into what I have and what I do now. That's
awesome. We're cut from the same cloth because I got started helping my dad solder a Heathkit TV back when I was like 6 years old. So,
Jake, what's some of the other things that you're interested in besides Tinkercad and 3D printing?
I've been doing some textiles, like sewing stuff together, a lot of electronics. I recently made a 16 by 16 RGB LED matrix that's on a completely flexible kind of panel that I snapped onto a sweatshirt. And I've been doing a lot of VFX and animations in Blender recently because it's just got so low of a barrier to enter.
Have you played with modeling through Blender as well?
I have played with modeling, but then kind of exporting it can be a little difficult because in Blender you don't have to have everything be like a watertight model. So like you can make things that are just like a plane and they don't have any thickness, but there are ways of exporting it. I know Vicky Silva from T-God3D does a lot of her designing for 3D printing inside of Blender, which I never really thought could be done because Blender is not, it doesn't have as good of a like a unit system as most do, but it can still be used for some amazing stuff.
Okay. Are
Jake,
there? Go ahead.
Jake, do you have any big projects coming up?
I don't really. I kind of have some that I've been working on. I've been making some if I can find it, some a bunch of puzzles in Tinkercad, and I was at a this maker. It's not a maker fair technically, but it's called Future Fest, and so I kind of just ramping up, finding all the stuff, and then now being that it was like last week, I don't really have that much that I've been doing.
All right. One more question from the chat. Mr. Butcham asked, "What printers do you have?"
So I just have my Lilsbot Taz 5 that I got for my birthday a couple of years ago, and it has a dual extruder V3 head, and it's been like it's just a total workhorse. It is so strong, and I've had a couple of problems over the years that I've had it, and I did buy one of those Ono 3D printers. You put the phone in it, and then like it uses the light from the phone to cure resin. Except it's been like a year that since I bought it, and it hasn't arrived, so I'm not sure I'm ever going to get it.
It's been a while since I've heard that name come up.
Yeah, it's been silent for quite some time, I think.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been burned on Kickstarters from time to time.
Definitely.
Although the one weird thing is that I didn't get it from Kickstarter. I got it like directly from their website. So it's kind of arguable.
Oh.
I kind of actually bought it from their website. So I might have some recourse there because it's not on Kickstarter. Because Kickstarter, you don't legally have to give them the rewards. It's just like pretty much encourage that you do.
Huh. I never knew they listed them on their website.
I didn't even know they had a website.
Kickstarter. All right. Well, if there's no more questions for Jake, we'll go ahead and move on to the next presenter. And like I said, in the chat, let us know. Jake has a huge amount of knowledge about Tinkercad. If you'd like to maybe see Jake come on and do like a quick 15-minute tutorial on future show and tells for F3DPCH, let us know, and we'll see what we can do to maybe make something a regular or semi-regular appearance. All right. Jake, will you be at EARF 2019?
I will be at EARF.
Awesome. Are you doing a booth, or are you just going to be attendee?
I'm just going to be walking around.
Awesome. I'll stop by the Friday night booth, and we're going to have the live stream going. If you want to talk to people in the chat, maybe tell everybody who's viewing to see what's going on at EARF, who you are and what you do, and maybe answer some more questions if there's more questions. You're more than welcome to stop in and be a guest on the stream again that Saturday. All right. Thanks, Jake.
You're welcome.
Okay. Next up, we have Adam from Powerbelt3D. Go ahead, Adam. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Adam, and I guess you could say I'm the founder of PowerBelt3D. I got a couple notes here that I wanted to just touch on. So I'm a mechanical engineer. I've been using 3D printers of all shapes and sizes for over 6 years now. I got a similar start in making to Jake. I started making computer games when I was about 8. My dad's a big computer guy. And I just branched into all sorts of different things from there. And what I noticed, having been in 3D printing for a little while now, was that conveyor belt 3D printing wasn't really accessible for a lot of the hobbyists and makers out there. Blackbelt3D started their branch, I guess 3 years ago now. I think it was 2016. But they have a really highly priced product, and it's more geared towards businesses and not really towards hobbyists. And I think that's a shame, because I think conveyor belt 3D printers are really cool, and they have a lot of advantages. And so I wanted to be able to bring the community something that was lower cost and that everyone would be able to use to kind of get their feet wet with 3D printing on a conveyor belt. So you'd really want to use it for one of two main reasons. The first being automatic print ejection. And so if you're not familiar with a conveyor belt 3D printer, usually the gantry, I'm trying to look in the screen here. The gantry is tilted a little bit, and then you have a conveyor belt underneath. And so as the conveyor belt moves, and this would be the X and Y plane, you can actually automatically push prints off of the build platform after they're done printing. And so by doing that, you can 3D print all day, all night, without having to go and actually remove the prints from the print bed. So I'm sure myself, like many other people, have set an alarm to wake up at 2 a.m. so that they can remove prints and start another print. But with this style of 3D printer, you don't really have to do that. The second big advantage is infinite 3D printing. And so infinite might be a little bit generous, but because of the tilted XY axis and the conveyor belt, you can actually 3D print really, really long objects. So I think the longest print I've done so far is 36 something inches. It's kind of a T-slot extrusion. So it's not super exciting. But when you think about it in terms of printing something bigger than the printer itself without having to glue sections of a model together, it's a really cool capability. And so I thought the best way to make this style of printer more accessible was to start a company and start delivering kits to the community of 3D printing enthusiasts. So I've sold a couple pre-beta kits that are nearly ready to ship. And then I'm doing a larger campaign of pre-orders starting just towards the end of this month, so that we can, get this idea and this technology out there. So I've been working on the design for over a year now. I'm on my 4th major design iteration. So I think we nearly have every single bug worked out. And it's designed to be easy to build, to use a minimum variation of different parts. I've personally built some kits that were more painful to put together than they were fun. So I didn't want to do that to anybody. And that I ended up fiddling with for months afterwards. So I want it to be a pleasant build experience. A couple specs of what we're calling the PowerBelt Zero. It has a 200 by 170 by infinite build volume. It's going to have a Core XY motion system, direct drive extruder, all metal hot end. I'm pretty proud of the heated bed setup we have. So it's actually divided into 2 little sections, a heated section and then a non-heated section towards where the prints would exit the conveyor belt. And what that allows you to do is it cools the print just a little bit before it exits so that it can come off of the build belt, if you will. We're going to be at a couple of events coming up. We're going to be at IRF, which I'm really excited about. I went to MRF 2017, just walking around. It was a lot of fun, but I'm excited to represent PowerBelt at this upcoming one. But before that, we're actually going to be at Buffalo Mini Maker Fair. So I live in central New York, and I love Maker Fairs, so I thought this would be a good kind of first event to show it to everybody.
Chris Guda was asking in the chat if you have pictures or something you can show on camera of the PowerBelt. If you want to, bottom of your screen, you can share your screen if you want to pull up pictures of the printer belt.
Yeah, let me see if I can do that.
Okay.
I've got 2 monitors going, so that might make it a little more challenging.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it works with that.
There we go. Okay. Is that working?
Yep.
Perfect. So we have pictures on our website. This is just kind of a rough picture of the not the current design stage, but a couple design stages back. In favor of transparency, I didn't want to just throw up a pretty rendering and get everyone all excited. So this is kind of where we're at. So what you can see is the 2 stages of the heated build platform. So this back section would be heated, and this front section would be cooled. I don't have the best cable management, but like a lot of the earlier kits that I was putting together years ago, cable management is something that's easy to do it yourself. And I know that myself and a lot of other people would rather prefer to do it themselves and kind of hack and modify the printers after they have them for a little while.
Can you talk a little bit? I know one of the biggest questions that everybody has, that one of the most common questions when it comes to the belt style printers, is the angle that the gantry prints at. Can you talk a little bit about why the angle, maybe even what the angle is on yours, and if there were any challenges with designing around printing at that angle?
Sure. So it was definitely new and different compared to like standard Prusa style printers. So printing at an angle is challenging because you want to be able to balance. Oh my cat just jumped on my chair. It's challenging for a couple of reasons. You want to be able to balance the force with which the filament is contacting the conveyor belt with overhangs. So our printer actually does 35 degrees. We found that to be a good balance in between making sure the layers could stick well to the conveyor belt and compensate for overhangs. Overhangs and orienting parts was probably the biggest learning curve I had when I started using conveyor belt printers because they work a lot differently. And it's a little bit hard to wrap your brain around. So I wrote a whole blog about it on our website and how to orient and slice your parts for a conveyor belt printer to try to help people with that learning curve.
All right. Did you have issues as far as the I know one of the problems that people have come across is the shape of the nozzle and printing at the angle, that most nozzles are not designed to print at an angle.
Right.
Any issues that you came up with there? Any custom changes or anything like that you have to make?
Yeah, so it was challenging, and what I ended up doing was kind of hacking together an E3D hot end. So you can't see in this picture at all. But what I did was it's a standard E3D V6. And what I did was I used just an M7 nut to kind of push the heatsink further up the throat of the hot end. And by doing that, I was able to use a standard Mark 8 hot end nozzle with the clone E3D that I've been using for some development. And that has worked surprisingly really well. That keeps the hot end and the cold end where they're supposed to be.
All right. So you don't have to do anything with the nozzle as far as like grinding an angle or anything into the nozzle that doesn't exist. I know that's one of the workarounds that people have come up with so far.
I tried it, and I found it to not be nearly as effective as just using kind of off-the-shelf hardware with this slight modification. In the kits that actually ship, I think we're going to be using just like a standard Mark 8 all-metal hot end. But I'm still working out some of the bugs behind all that.
All right. Dave Randolph from Printed Solid asked, how have you been handling the patents out there already?
That is a very common question. And the reality of it is I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about patents around this technology. A lot of people want to reference the MakerBot automated build platform, or they want to reference some patents that Blackbelt3D had filed. And I'm not sure any of them are super valid or super related to this technology. As far as my research can tell, this technology was published as open source by Andreas Bastian in about 2016, right before Black Belt had started their company out of ColorFab. And so I could be wrong. There could be research that I'm missing here, but from everything I can gather, this is an open source design, and we're just one of a few companies to try to commercialize it. I know there's Black Belt, there's Robot Factory. I know there was the printer belt at one point in time. So I think it's fair game. It's not something that I'm worried about.
Okay. NAC 3D. Do you know? Are you aware of Carl NAC 3D design with the White Knight?
Yeah, yeah.
He's in the chat. He said he's been working with E3D on a custom belt printer version of the V6 and a custom nozzle. He's the one I've gotten to talk to the most. So like a lot of my questions are kind of based on the White Knight, just because that's my personal interaction with belt printers.
Sure.
So not trying to ask a lot of questions based on the White Knight, but that's my experience level with them.
Hey,
so.
Any questions are fair game.
Yeah. I know that he was the one who I know had to grind down the nozzle in order to get the angles to work. And I was there when he was talking with E3D at Murph this year, 2019.
Yeah.
About a potential custom setup for the belt printers. Anybody else on the panel, if you guys have questions, feel free to jump in and ask. I don't know if you mentioned it or not. What is the cost or projected cost of a kit?
So the kits are going to be $399. I think that's a pretty fair price. Certainly the most or the least expensive that I've seen of any belt printers so far. So we're going to have them available at $399 for the first 50 pre-orders. Then that price is going to jump to $429 and up from there. I think the end-all retail cost would be $499. And so by supporting us early on, you can save some money.
All right. What's been your biggest challenge so far?
This thing has gone through a ton of design iterations, and I think narrowing down the belt material and also how to properly tighten and align the conveyor belt has been a challenge. Other than that, calibration is a lot trickier on a conveyor belt printer from what I've seen, because the Y-axis and the Z-axis are combined. And so the normal processes of just printing a calibration cube get a little bit muddy. So I ended up just designing some custom calibration objects that helped out a lot when getting this thing up and running.
I have a couple questions, Matt. First off, what are you using for electronics, if you hadn't mentioned before?
Hasn't been mentioned, but good question. So we are using an MKS base, I think it's Generation L control board with DRV 8825 drivers. On that board, they're interchangeable, so if you want to upgrade them later, you can. I didn't want to do anything with built-in drivers. Melzi boards generally drive me crazy just because of how limited they are.
Yeah, there was a question there from Carl about the width of the belt compared to the rollers. The belt on the picture you showed was quite narrow compared to the rollers. Is that just a prototype thing, or will the bed be as wide as the rollers?
Yeah, it's mostly a prototype thing, and it's also a purging technique. And so normal 3D printers would print... it's not a skirt, but it's the purge lines around the perimeter of an object before you start printing. And if you do that on a conveyor belt printer, that is going to interfere with printing parts continuously, since you're printing over the same part of the belt over and over again. So instead, in the start script, there's a purge action. And we want to do that outside of the belt. So it's for purging, and also the current iteration has a wider belt in relationship to the actual build platform. So the picture is a little bit misleading.
And one other question, as far as slicing, are you just using Cura, the black belt Cura that came out, or do you have some other unique slicing solutions for your printer?
Right now, I'm using black belt Cura. It's free, it's easy to use, and it seems like a good solution. On our website, in the orientation slicing blog, we also reference Bill Steele's post-processing script. I'd love to see some more development on that. And as we progress and grow as a company, I'm hoping we can get some more stable and more fully featured slicing options out there. Even though it's easy to use, we've had it crash quite a few times. So I think as conveyor belt printers grow in popularity, there will be a need for better slicing.
What we've seen with all the different the belt style printers, different ways to solve the build platform itself. As far as we've seen stainless steel, I've seen mention of fabric to act that the build surface adheres to. What are you guys using for your solution there?
It's been changing slowly, and so the first belt we tried was aluminum foil, and then we tried computer paper, construction paper. We did try stainless steel foil. Right now, it's a very special paper, usually used to cover floors during home renovations or something like that. We found that the papers and fabrics worked better because they had less shape memory. And so, for example, if I had aluminum foil or stainless steel foil, and then I went and just grabbed the part and pulled it off the belt, which I had to do from time to time, instead of just nicely rolling them off the print bed, that would actually deform the foil, and then that part of the belt wouldn't be accurate anymore. But if you're using a fabric or a paper, it doesn't have that shape memory. And so as long as you have it tight, you don't have as many print issues.
Right. It's funny you mentioned that material. I don't remember the name of it, but I have that same material, or the floor laminate, on a few of my CR10s for the build surface, and it works freaking amazing.
Really?
I do. Joe Prusa had 2 years ago said the name of the product, and I managed to remember what it was long enough to ask a guy who does signs, who actually last year at Earth brought me 2 different types of material.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you're talking about. I just don't know the name of it.
Yeah. Like I said, we've tested a bunch of different materials. For a while, we were printing on vinyl, like the clear vinyl you would get from a craft store. And it felt really strange to be printing on that material compared to you're normally printing on a rigid build plate. But it worked really well, as long as the rollers were tight.
All right. Dave Randolph asked, the cooling zone, is it active or just a heat sink?
It's active, and so it's using the exact same 30 millimeter fan on the E3D heatsink, and then we have a part cooling fan on the side as well. But again, printing at an angle makes part cooling more difficult, or maybe just not as well developed as with your standard 3D printing setup.
All right. Just in case what he might have meant, I think he may have been referring to as far as you have your heated zone on the build platform. And then
okay.
Just in case that's what he's thinking of, because that's where my mind went.
Gotcha. So in the cooling zone on the build platform underneath the conveyor belt, that is not actively cooled. So it's essentially just a piece of aluminum open to the air. So I guess you could call it a room temperature build zone. But the idea is that the conveyor belt is moving out of the hot zone and then is able to kind of sink the heat that remains on the belt to that piece of aluminum. And it's been really effective so far.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions in the chat? If you guys do have any more questions for Adam and any questions for any of the presenters, tag it with at Friday 3D Printing Community Hangout, at How I Do It, at 3DP Iceland, or at Shenanigans and Shawnanigans. And we'll try to get your questions asked in a semi-timely manner. Fastest print speed.
Fastest print speed. The latest prototype was moving at about 35 millimeters a second. So that's without the Core XY implementation. So I'm expecting we can go a lot faster once that is perfected. That's another challenge with belt printing, is usually you want the first layer of your print to go really slow, assuming everyone on here knows that. And when you're printing on a belt, essentially every layer has a portion of it that is your first layer that has to stick to the conveyor belt. So it's tricky, and it usually results in moving a little bit slower. But then again, I think the automated part ejection and the infinite printing makes up for a lot of that slower print speed.
I haven't gotten to play with Black Belt Cura. Is there any kind of settings in there currently that would decelerate for the first layer, the contact layer, we'll call it, and then accelerate again for the rest of it? Do they have any settings in there for that yet?
Yes. So there's two settings in there. One is just your first layer speed, like most slicers would have. So in my profile, I have that turned way down, and then there's a checkbox where you can set the print speed for just the outer shell. And so the outer shell then becomes the tool path that touches the belt during every rotation. And so by adjusting those two things, you can do better.
Okay. And then Chris Gulata, I hope I'm saying that right, asked, when do you plan to ship?
The goal is to have all the units done by halfway through 2020. I know nobody likes to wait. So the intention with this project is to minimize that risk and that waiting period by limiting the number of pre-orders to only 500 units. And so we're not trying to be a multi-million-dollar Kickstarter campaign that never delivers. We want to work with the community and deliver high quality units as quickly as possible to get up and running.
All right. And you guys are going to be at Earth. Will you have a working prototype there to show off?
Yes, we will. That's the plan.
Okay. If there's no other questions from the presenters and the co-hosts, we'll go ahead and move over to Paul.
Yeah, maybe one for me. I was thinking about, can you print the supports on a belt printer? Is that possible?
Yeah, actually, the short answer is yes. Black Belt Cura has support generation built in. But again, a lot like overhangs, support material works a lot differently with belt printers. There's a quick video on our YouTube channel of 3D printing in mid-air. So if you are printing at an overhang, I'm trying to think of how to say this. It's easier for me to see in my head. But if you watch the video, it'll make total sense. Because you're printing at an angle, essentially everything you print is an overhang, but also nothing you print is an overhang in the direction of the conveyor belt. And so a lot of times models that need support material don't need support material when you're printing on a belt.
Okay. Adam, do you want to go ahead and tell everybody one more time where they can find PowerBelt? I'm sorry.
Sure. You can find us on Powerbelt3D.com. And then we're at Powerbelt3D on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube.
All right. And you guys will be at the Buffalo Maker Faire, Mini Maker Faire, I guess it is?
Yes, Buffalo Mini Maker Faire is next weekend on Saturday, September 28th, and then we will be at ERF in October.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Adam, for coming on. For anybody who didn't catch where to follow PowerBelt, links are down in the description below.
Yeah,
So,
I just posted links as well in the chat.
thank you, Martin.
Yeah.
All right. We'll go
Awesome.
ahead and
Thank you.
move over. Yep. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move over to Paul, our last presenter for the night.
Hey guys, Paul Paukstellis here. You can find me pretty much only on Twitter. I don't do many other things, and the handle's Paukstellis. So I am a research scientist and a university professor. I work at the University of Maryland, which means I'm an educator, and that's really how I got interested in 3D printing and the 3D printing realm. But as part of that, anytime I kind of see a problem, I have to come up with solutions for it. So I got into kind of the hardware aspect of 3D printing, and I build lots of crazy 3D printers, mostly out of reclaimed lab equipment, as well as do some software and now more into printer firmware things as well. In some ways, I don't know, I don't have a sort of long thing to go into, but just to give you some background about the project that I'm going to talk about tonight. About a year and a half ago, I released a plugin for Octoprint, which a lot of people use, which was called Cancel Objects. And the idea here was, looking around forums and things like that, a lot of people had this idea of, well, it would be nice if you're printing multiple things and something starts to fail that you can just, stop printing one object. And some of the printing software out there, like I think Repetier server, had options for you to exclude areas that it would stop printing in. And I was sort of trying to think of a way that could be done with Octoprint in a more straightforward manner. And I ultimately came up with an idea of being able to just segment G-code up in a way that you knew which parts of G-code were associated with which object you were printing. And I developed this plugin, and right before ERF last year, Stefan from CNC Kitchen did a video on it, and it was kind of neat to go to ERF last year and not know anybody, and then I kind of showed a couple people this plugin on my printer, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we saw that video," so that was kind of neat. But the real trick of that whole thing was initially how to get the slicers to do what you wanted them to do. So you had to find a way to delineate these chunks of G-code with these particular objects. And at first, this was only starting with Simplify 3D because you could split that up into processes. So you could have each of your object be a process. And there were little comments in the Simplify 3D G-code that showed you that. And you could use those comments as ways to delineate blocks of G-code. Ultimately, both Slick 3R and Prusa Slicer, these comments got incorporated by a guy by the name of Super Merrill. And then I worked on Cura with some other things that other people did to include comments to be able to delineate objects within G-code. This was great. I don't know how many people are actually using this plugin out there. I know I saw Techie Dad in the chat earlier, and I know he was having problems with the plugin, but we'll try to get this sorted out. But the I guess kind of the downside with this was that you had to use Octoprint. And effectively, the way that this works is that once you tell Octoprint that you wanted to cancel an object, when it was essentially streaming the G-code to your printer and you would hit a canceled object, it would just skip all of those lines of G-code until you came to the end of the object, and it would move on to the next one. So it works well with Octoprint, but if you were printing from an SD card or something like that, it simply, you couldn't use it for that. So I got to thinking, well, maybe there was a way that we could actually do this in firmware. If we actually made some modifications to Marlin to be able to both know how many objects were in the G-code file that you're going to have, be able to delineate these blocks of G-code in essentially the same way, and then actually cancel objects that way. So I'll just play the video, I guess, that I had put on Twitter of this actual process. So I don't know if the sound's going to show up through this or not, but I'm printing from the SD card here, and I've just got 4 cubes that are printing, and this is the... Oh, I'm not screen sharing, am I?
Yeah, you got to hit for screen share.
Oh, yeah. All right, well, let's go back and try that again. And now everything is slowing down.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the video will work with StreamYard or not.
Let's see what happens.
Yep, all for it. Oop, where'd it go? There you go. So it's going to be a little bit jumpy. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of annotate over. So it's printing from SD here. There's 4 cubes that are being printed, and I can go to the different objects here, and these are just kind of hard coded in. I don't have all the LCD stuff worked out, but just by clicking the buttons, then it's actually canceling the object, and it's basically working the exact same way that the Octoprint plugin does just now from firmware. And it was one of those things where I didn't know where to start, really. I spent a lot of time looking at Marlin 2.0 to try to figure out how I was going to actually do this. And then it took me really only about, I think, somewhere in the line of like 4 hours to start, busting in there and figuring out how to make the modifications that I needed to make that work. So there are obviously some advantages of doing it this way. The main one being that it doesn't matter if you're printing from USB or from the SD card, you can cancel these objects. It's really minimal code to changes to Marlin, so this can happen fairly quickly. And I'd say that there's also a few disadvantages, or at least limitations, to this. And one of those is that it does require that you use relative extrusion distances. If you try to use absolute extrusion distances, all of those distances in the canceled object, you would lose those. So when you went on to the next object, it would try to be spitting out a whole bunch of filament at one time, which wouldn't work too well. It still requires the same type of modifications to the slicers that are needed for the Octoprint plugin, though in a little bit of a different way. And maybe I can show those just as what I'm doing now as sort of a, I guess this is still kind of a work in progress, but also there's some limitations to actually canceling with the LCD screen and how many objects you could actually have. If you wanted to, for example, have string identifiers for each of the objects that came out of the G code, our little mostly 8-bit boards that we have just really don't have enough memory to be able to hold lots of strings. So if you had something where you had like 100 objects and they all had individual names, you might run into some limitations there. I'm going to go back to screen sharing for a moment.
Okay.
And I just, for a start, show you in Prusa Slicer, which is up here, what you have to actually do to get these. So if you're not using the Octoprint plugin yet and you'd like to, I don't know if in the stream you can actually make out what any of this is, if it's clear enough. But under the print settings in Prusa Slicer, if you go, this is actually what's been included here. So this label objects, if you turn this on here, what this will do is when you export the G code, it'll give you comments within the G code. And again, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to actually see this, but for example, here it says printing object 20mm cube ID 0 copy 1. And if you go further down, scroll further down here, you've got a comment saying that you're stop printing that object, and then you're going to start printing the next object. So those are the comments that we use. Now for this Marlin firmware modification, what I'm doing is I'm actually just post-processing those comments.
Uh-oh. And we lost Paul.
He dropped out.
Hopefully he'll jump back in here in a second.
Yeah.
Just left us hanging.
What was that?
I said he just left us hanging. I want to know more.
Paul, come back.
You gotta come to Earth now to find out the rest of the story.
He left us hanging.
Hopefully, I don't know if he was on a laptop and if it shut down on him or if he's on a desktop. I'm not sure what he was streaming from.
The share screen button is right next to the leave studio button, so that might have been the issue.
I think Martin, did you you hit the leave studio earlier before we started the stream?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I went away for a few seconds.
We'll give Paul a minute to jump back.
Hey, real quick, while we're waiting, there was I can't remember if it was Martine or who it was that asked earlier about the file sizes.
Sure.
I did go and fire up another machine and look real quick, but the image sizes from the raw images is roughly 460 meg or somewhere in that range, 450, 460 meg, and then the actual resulting 3D object file, including the actual object and the what am I trying to think of? The skin that goes on it, the image skin that goes on it is roughly about 70 meg.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I would be interested in getting the raw images from you because I have Photoscan or Metashape
absolutely, yeah,
as well. Play around with higher detail settings than you probably would run. Because
sure. I can. That wouldn't be a problem. I can hand those to you right there on the spot too. So.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I played around with photogrammetry a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like for my hat, I had my wife run around me with a camera. I was sitting on a chair outside because our apartment is quite small, so we had to go outside in a public yard, and she was running around me in several circles, and some of the neighbors were watching us what on earth they were doing.
Paul's back.
Yeah, there he is.
I don't know what that was about.
Welcome.
How much did you actually hear?
It was a cliffhanger, man. We're all waiting.
You left, made it so distracting that I don't even remember exactly where we were at.
Yeah. You talked about the number of objects you would have to have or could support. There was a question from Brian Wines in the chat about naming the objects with names, so you could actually see the names in the firmware. So what object would be cancelled?
Yeah, that will be a limitation because that will be something that you'll have to determine at compilation time of the firmware as to the maximum number of objects you want and the maximum length of the name that you want.
Yeah, but the name, can you pick out the name from the G code, or is a name in the firmware just set to object 1, object 2?
Yeah, you could do it. It's possible. Okay. It's not something that I've done yet.
Okay.
Yeah, that was always the part that confused me. Like like with cancel object, I would leave Simplify 3D open with the processes, and if I was slicing something else, I'd just open another window.
Yeah.
But I kept the process names there so that I knew like what order they were in, so I knew what was object 1, object 2, and so on.
That's definitely one of the advantages of the Octoprint plugin, because now, for example, you can open the G code viewer, and it actually tags the objects in the G code viewer, and you can click on the objects in the G code viewer to cancel them there.
I guess the good news is I can say I haven't seen that feature because I haven't had to actually utilize it as of late.
That's very good.
There was another question. Oh no, okay, Martin got that. So you had mentioned this is Marlin 2.0.
Yeah.
Is it backwards compatible with Marlin 1 or not?
It would be, but it's Marlin 1's at end of life. So the changes are very minimal that had to be made to Marlin, actually. So it could very well be included in there, but I don't think that there's going to be any more features added to Marlin 1 in the mainline Marlin. So I just stuck with Marlin 2.
Okay, so it's not a limitation of like you have to have a 32-bit board or anything.
No. I think that's a little bit maybe of a misconception around with people that Marlin 2 is for 32-bit boards. It's not. It's just including support for 32-bit boards now in Marlin 2.
What kind of memory requirements do you require? I know, like printers like the CR10, the original CR10. Are extremely limited. If you've put a customized version of Marlin on, you've pretty much maxed it out. What kind of memory limitations or memory usage are you looking at there? Or what boards are you running it on?
I've only run it on an INC Rambo so far. But the modifications itself, as I say, are very, very small. It doesn't take much at all. But the names, if you want to include names in there and individual strings, that's going to use up some that you just can't get around, unless there may be smarter ways to do it that I just don't know, how to do it. And I don't think Scott is in the chat there, but
yeah, I haven't seen him pop in at all today.
But there may be alternative ways to actually do that. One of the things that should be fairly simple, as far as knowing which object it is in the firmware that you want to cancel, is that you can just display the object name or the object number on the LCD when it comes to that object. So you could say current active object is object 1, and then if that's the one that you want to cancel, then you just move your little dials and cancel object 1.
That's actually a really good point, because I do something similar to that with when I'm printing with the pallet, where the pallet's making filament, it's making whatever color or feeding whatever color it's anticipating or like what's coming up. But one of the things I did, customized my tool change G code in Simplify 3D, that it changes the display for what color should be printing at that time. So to get a better judge if something's failing, and it's like, it's not far enough off yet that I can tell it's going to screw it up down the road on a longer print. So that, doing that actually makes a lot of sense to identify which object is currently failing.
Yeah, I think you need something like that in there. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I've been working on a little bit, though. With Earth coming up and having lots of printer projects, I haven't spent that much time on this, but hopefully I'll get around to working on it a little more. I find programming the LCD in Marlin to be pretty challenging. I don't know, it's not as intuitive to me as actually looking at more of where there's a lot of macro definitions and things. It's just like I'm not sure what's going on, but the C++ itself is easier in some respects.
If somebody wanted to play, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, a quick question about your changes for the Marlin software. Will that be included in the main Marlin download, or is your like a fork of it? Or
yeah, so I currently have a fork of it, which I'm just doing the development on. I'll put in a pull request once I feel it's at a place where it is useful enough and where people who know more than I do could actually, clearly say, okay, here's what we have to do to make this work well. But again, it's not that much that's in there. I mean, I think there's probably maybe 50 lines of code in actual the stuff that's there in Marlin. You have to add in they're what I'm calling, I think you missed all this when I went off, but I have object codes, which are O lines basically that tell where the different objects are in the G code. So you have to have commands for all of those. So there's some new files in there, but the things that have been modified in Marlin are really pretty minimal.
Is there a limitation to the number of objects by doing it in firmware?
Yeah. Well, I mean, only if you're dealing with having string names associated with objects. If you're not having string names associated with the objects, then really there's no limitation to the number of objects that you'd have.
Okay. I was thinking, like, for somebody who's running a belt printer that may be running a belt printer using Marlin, they're printing off part after part after part. If they can cancel one that's failing and just go to the next part, it would be a really useful thing. I know things like the really popular 32-bit board, Duet boards. I think like Carl has that ability with the White Knight to cancel a current one and go to the next. Like it's part of the repetitive printing settings that they have.
Right.
But for somebody who was looking at building a belt printer based on Marlin, this would give them a really good option once that's baked in. Yeah,
it would. And again, there shouldn't be any limitation to the number of objects that you have in there. It's not going to take up much of the program memory at all to have, thousands of objects. So
right. Okay. So anybody in the chat, if you have questions, tag at Seananigans, at 3DP Iceland, at How I Do It, or at Friday 3D Printing Community Hangout. Obviously, I don't expect anybody to tag the last one. That's too long. But we'll try to ask your questions to Paul to get some answers for you. If somebody wanted to experiment with it now, where can they? You said you do have a fork on GitHub.
Yep. It is. So my GitHub username is Paukstellis. There's a Marlin fork, and it is, I believe, the branch is called Cancel Object.
Okay. Paul's information is not in the description for GitHub right now. After the stream, I'll go pull a link to his GitHub and drop it in the YouTube description for anybody who wants to give it a go.
And you can also find the Octoprint Cancel Object there and a variety of other, most of the stuff I have there is 3D printing related, some Blender stuff, some other things for cycling USB cameras for Octoprint, things like that.
And Martin just dropped the link to the GitHub.
Wow.
That's for the Octoprint plugin, but you can pedal back to Paul's account to what is the fork called? Is it Cancel Object?
Cancel Object, yeah.
Okay. What's the biggest challenge that you faced along the way? I know, like, when you did the first Cancel Object plugin for Octoprint, you had issues where in the G code, if the layer change occurred within that object, I know that was something that you had to tackle. What's some of the biggest problems you've had with integrating this into Marlin?
Yeah, really the integration into Marlin, to be honest, there were no, the only challenges are working with the LCD screen. Once I figured out how the parser actually worked in Marlin and where I needed to put these commands in, it was fast.
Simple.
Right. Yeah, it was
partially because you did it in 4 hours. I was like, wow.
Yeah, and partially because I'd already thought about this with respect to the Octoprint plugin and right. How it was going to work. I would say that overall, this idea of tagging blocks of G code, the biggest challenge is getting consistency in the slicers, because they all do things different ways, and how they do things like reset extrusion distances, how they do supports is one that's really annoying. So, for example, if you use Cura to do cancel objects, Cura wants to tag every single support that would be on your build plate as its own individual object, basically, or not individual object, as one object. So it does all the supports together. So even if you cancel an object, it won't cancel the supports that are associated with it. That's kind of annoying. Prusa Slicer doesn't have that issue. It sort of has supports associated with objects. Yeah, other than I'd say that's the biggest challenge. And I think that this is something, just as a general theme, that we're going to be running into with 3D printing, is that there are really no standards for how things go. And I guess the CNC community started with the G code and sort of ran into that. But as we add more and more features, it's going to become more difficult to know how to do that. Or maybe we don't need that.
Right.
But.
And I know Adam's in the waiting room, but he did write in the StreamYard chat that the PowerBelt Zero runs on Marlin. So talking about using this as a way to cancel a print if it fails, the PowerBelt Zero would be able to make use of that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. And I hope that it shouldn't take too long to get this. I think Marlin 2.0 is. I don't know that it has official release yet. I think there was a feature freeze on it, and then Scott was gonna sort of get all of the last bits in before. Maybe it has been released. I don't remember the details on that. But
yeah, I'm not sure. I was kind of following it really close up until the end of July or something like that, and then I kind of let it get away from me a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a feature freeze now, but so the next development of Marlin 2 point whatever, maybe we'll see this in there.
Cool.
Carl wants to know if the dragon will be at Earth.
Yes, it will. Provided that I can get it out of the room it's currently in and into the truck and to Earth.
Into the truck this time, not the car.
into the truck because my plan is, and Chris, I hope you're not upset about this. I want to bring both of my big printers, see if I can fit them both on a table.
Cool.
We'll see.
I joke that Paul's like the 3D printing mad scientist because he has his 5-head tool changer that's inspired after a microscope and the way that you change lenses on a microscope. He takes all these, for those of you who aren't familiar with Paul, he takes liquid handling machines. Basically, you pretty much look at anything the college is getting rid of and think, how can I repurpose that? That's pretty much where this all comes from, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that comes from like just having a tinker mentality. And as soon as I got into 3D printing, everything that I saw that had, a motion system, I was thinking about how I could turn it into a 3D printer. So
yeah, he's got a liquid handling printer machine converted to a 3D printer that is servo driven and closed loop, so you can take and move the gantry or move the print head, and it will go back to where it was printing at. But it's really neat. At Earth last year, he literally would just smack it and it would go boing and stop back very close, if not dead on where it was supposed to be printing, and keep going.
Yeah, I've done some upgrades to that one, so I'm hoping to bring it to Earth. Actually, here's part of the upgrades. So this is the entire board here. So it's running 2 STM32 blue pills, basically. And one controls all the servo motors. One runs Marlin. And that has everything I need right here. All housed within just this one big robotic arm. So you have to see it. The X, Y, and Z are all entirely integrated as one piece, basically. Yep.
Definitely, if you're going to Earth, check out Paul's table. You'll be impressed. Or else you'll leave scratching your head, one or the other. So, all right.
And we had mentions of cable management, and I have absolutely no sense of cable management. So there are wires everywhere.
I think that's allowed at Earth.
Yeah, I hope so. As long as I don't start any fires, right?
Yep. And Chris said to send him a message tomorrow.
Okay.
Just double checking the chat to see if we had any more questions. Brian said he's super tired from a long day, so he's heading to bed. He said thank you to all who presented tonight, and to everybody in the chat. Thanks, Brian, for joining us.
Yeah, it would be interesting if you get your hands on a KUKA, like a robotic arm, and implement a hot end on that one and see what you could do with that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. If you look at Marlin, there's SCARA things for doing robotic arms already there. So people have done some of those things, but I have not myself played with those yet.
Okay. Before we run into outros, I want to do two things. One, Martin and Sean, do you guys have anything that you want to show off tonight?
Yeah, maybe I can show image of what I'm playing around with. Let me switch cameras. Yeah, this one I showed it briefly. This is a Millennium Falcon I'm building. It's so far printed the top and the bottom piece. I'm printing all the internals. It's over 285 or 88 parts. It's quite big of a project. So you can see a Benji here for scale. So far, I'm gonna have to look at my Excel sheet here. So far, I've been using 9 kilos of filament and a total of 1,655 hours of printing so far. So it's been quite a project to print. It's been in full 24 hours, 70 days. So, but I'm printing both on my Prusa printers. So I split it in two. Some of it was printed on my CR10 as well. So I'm running through a lot of filament these days and getting this done. So it's all printed in Prusament. I want to have the Millennium Falcon in the Prusament gray, but just because of you can see the different lighting on different panels. Because of the print orientation, I will end up painting it. I intended to have it not painted, but then I ran out of gray and had some pink. So here's some pinks, and there's also some blues as well, blue parts. So yeah, it will be painted. And I've done like 2 live streams so far where I was gluing it together and using 3D glue. Now I'm just waiting for more glue. I've used like a half a liter of glue so far. So it's quite a project.
I also have some suggestions for ways you can glue things together without using gloop. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah, okay.
Paul has a video on his YouTube channel. If that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I will have a look.
Cool. Thanks, Martin. And I notice now, I know this from the back channels, but I noticed there's one less printer behind you, Martin.
Yeah, there's a this pile here. I'm gonna switch over to the camera. This pile of stuff.
Yep.
This was my CR10. It is no longer a CR10.
It looks like my CR10.
Yeah, but to give this pile some credit, this is a CR10 in the same working state as my CR10 when I got it. So, as a non-working state. So I finally gave up on my printer. I have a list of problems. I put it on Twitter earlier today, and you can check it out on my Twitter feed. But I'm going to do a video as well on going over the problems I had. But I had so many problems and wasting a lot of time fixing it, doing upgrades, and maybe the only good thing about that printer is because of all its fault, it gave me a chance to do repairs, and I did a lot of YouTube videos for doing those repairs. So it gave me maybe good content for my channel, but having so many failures and issues, and I finally gave up this weekend or this week and decided to just scrap it, end its life.
Okay. All right. Next up, Sean.
What's up? So I have been working on this FDL blaster, this FDL3, for quite some time now. I did some modifications to it in ZBrush, and so I've been working with Project FDL, and we're kind of collaborating on this project. But it is this is the blaster, So I modified a whole bunch of this stuff. You can find the pictures on my Twitter and I think my Instagram also. So a lot of this is modified, just with textures. What else? So this is all iron, rusted iron, and this is as well. So I have two of these. I have two fronts and one back that I'm doing, and then the side panels. If my lighting would stop flickering, the side panels are iron, and it's got leather on the sides for both of the sides, and then. So the whole theme around this is kind of like, it's supposed to be like if a blacksmith were to make it back in the day, maybe like during the Viking Age, around that time. So, they had limited, things to work with, limited metals. So it's supposed to kind of look like if it was hammered out and forged. In a blacksmith shop. So it's not going to be all 3D printed. So most of the actual parts are 3D printed. The grips are actually, where is it? It's going to be zebra wood. So I have zebra wood that I am going to be doing some woodworking and making the grips out of that, and then doing a nice oil over that. And then I was looking to make a buttstock, and I wanted it to actually be stainless steel or tool steel or whatever, and actually forged and twisted and all that. I tried to do it myself, and I don't have my metal shop anymore, so I reached out to Carl, who has a mystery friend who I don't even know his name. I have never met him, but he agreed to help me. Or I guess not help me, but do it for me. So it just came in today, and I will be having a video on it very, very soon that I just shot. But this is a preview of it. So that is the buttstock, and I'm blown away by it. It is so cool. So it's gonna look pretty awesome. With the wrought iron and or the steel, and then the look of this. So once that's all together, there'll be pictures, there'll be videos, and then it will be displayed at EARF, I believe, or at least I'll bring it and you can see it. But yeah, so that's what I'm working on. Hopefully it will be done very soon. Everything's done except for the grips, and then just gotta put it all together, and I have all the electronics and everything. There's going to be some brass on there. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Cool. Thanks, Sean. And then just some of the stuff I've been working on, just to show a little bit. Back in July during the show and tell, I showed an Iron Man helmet, all one-piece print, with the exception of that issue. That was a design flaw. This is part of an ongoing project that will be coming to an end in 2.5 weeks. The fire company that I am a member of, my sister and I do a program during National Fire Prevention Week, where during the day a bunch of the volunteer firefighters go around to the local elementary schools and preschools and do a fire safety presentation to the kids. And then in the evening, our fire company has a open house where we open up the station. People can literally walk anywhere they want. They can climb all over the trucks, and we have fire truck rides, and we do some demonstrations and stuff for Fire Prevention Week. This year, the NFPA, for those of you not in the United States, the National Fire Protection Agency, chose the theme, Not Every Hero Wears a Cape. And as the moment that I heard the theme, my mind started going wild. So I came up with a game plan that during our open house, we're bringing the superheroes to our open house. So we're going to have a few actors wearing the 3D printed helmets and carrying the 3D printed props, like the full-size Captain America shield, around at our open house. And they're also going to be involved in our demonstrations. One of the ones that we're going to do is a vehicle rescue demonstration where we'll have a trapped victim in a car. And throughout the presentation, so first things first, with a vehicle or a car accident, one of the things the fire company has to do before we can do anything else is we have to stabilize a car. As our chief is talking to the audience and explaining what the call is, what the accident is that we're coming up on, one of the superheroes is going to jump in when he says that we need to act quickly to get the patient out. One of our superhero actors is going to jump in and go act as if they're going to use their superpower to rip a door off the car. And the chief's going to stop him and explain why we can't just rip a door off the car and why we have to do things gently as to not injure the victim in the car. Later on in the night, that's going to happen a couple of times through that demo where each of our superheroes are going to attempt to use their abilities, and the chief's going to stop and explain why we can't just do that. Later on in the night, then, we're going to also do a grease fire demonstration and how to properly extinguish a grease fire. Iron Man's going to be involved in that demonstration. He has it built into his suit. Tony Stark obviously has to have a fire extinguisher in there. So our Iron Man's going to put his arm up like he's going to put the fire out with his fire extinguisher, and our chief's going to stop him and say, wait, not everybody in the crowd has a fire extinguisher built into their suit of armor. One of the jokes, so to speak, that we're going to do is for anybody who's heard about car accidents and things like that for years, there's a tool that's called the Jaws of Life. That is a very well-known tool in the fire service and people outside of the fire service. We had a donation from a local sheet metal company. They made me the shell of Thor's hammer, just the body of the hammer. I took Chaos Cortec, Chelsea and Garrett's Thor hammer, and I cut the ends off with all the scroll work in it, which is just out of reach. So this is the metal shell that they made up for me for the hammer. It's hollow inside, and then these ended up being too small because, I printed them and didn't measure. But I'm going to have the scroll work on the end and make Thor's hammer. We're going to demonstrate to the audience how we practice with the Jaws of Life and how precise we can control the tool, which the way we're going to do that is with the demonstration that we actually use for training, which is picking up empty soda cans without crushing them and actually stacking, making a tower out of it. Throughout the demonstration, at some point, Captain America is going to pull Thor's hammer out of the trunk of the car that we used for the demonstration and say, let me try that. And he's going to sit Captain America's hammer down, Thor's hammer down, and accidentally crush Thor's hammer to show the power of our tools. So this has been going on since the beginning of July that I've been pulling models. I designed the Captain America shield and been printing all that stuff. I have 2.5 weeks yet to finish and paint everything and get it ready to go. So that's my project, my ongoing kind of an update from where I left it in July during the last show and tell. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have going on right now. Paul, let's bring you back up here real quick. An update for Earth. The word's been spreading that we have a competition going on, and you happen to be the brainchild of said competition. You're muted again.
All right, there, unmuted. There's a couple of competitions going on, but one of them, and the one that I sort of conceived of, was the idea of having a benchy print off. So doing speed benchies The idea here is that you print the highest quality benchy you can in the shortest amount of time. We're having 2 categories, 30-minute and 60-minute. You have to print them at IRF on Saturday, and then judges will judge the quality within these 2 categories and give out prizes. So we've got prize sponsors from Wham Bam, Protopasta, Slice Engineering, CCT Designs. I think we might have one more. I'm not remembering right now, but yeah, so it's an opportunity to get some bragging rights, see who can print the best benchy the fastest. And the filament's being provided by MakerBox, so everyone will be using the same filament, so that'll be a common playing field for everyone. I think it'll be fun. It's like all of these things, it'll just be kind of a fun event to see how people come up with different slicing techniques and how well their hardware is tuned in, and just to see those hot ends flying around will be pretty cool.
Yep. One of the questions that had come up this week during the community catch-up stream was whether we would accept submissions from 3D printing pens, and to which I answered yes, we will, because I want to see the results that we get. So we will absolutely, if you are at IRF on Saturday and you can print with 1.75 millimeter filament, have we heard anything more about the 2.85 or 3 millimeter?
We haven't. I think I asked Matt that we should use something where he has at least a little bit of 2.85.
Okay. Just
in case, but I haven't heard yet about anyone wanting to print with 2.85.
Yeah, all the feelers I've put out, it's all been 1.75.
Yeah.
So, or else they have like an Ultimaker or something that they're capable of using the conversion for 1.75.
And like a lot of things with this, we'll figure it out when the time comes, if we have to.
But yeah, so more or less though, as long as you can print with 1.75 and you can make a benchy or an attempt at a benchy, we'll accept the entry. All of the submissions will be shown on the live stream as they're turned in. So if you're not able to make it, keep an eye out throughout the day on the live stream and you'll get to see some of the submissions. I do ask that even if you have an absolute failure trying to print the 30-minute benchy, still turn in your submission, if that the best out of your submissions, because we want to see it all. We want to see from the best to the worst, and some of them I'm sure will get some laughs, and we want to have some fun with it. We want to see what everybody's capable of.
And I think it'll also be good for, talking with the contestants about what strategies they took and how they achieved their results. It's a way to spread knowledge to the community. I don't know that necessarily that you are going to do speed benchies all the time, but you learn something about slicing from how people approach this contest.
Absolutely. Anybody who submits a benchy who would like to talk about what they did to get their result on the stream, they are more than welcome to as well. Carl asked in the chat if the Cocoa Press chocolate printer will be allowed to enter the benchy contest, and I am making a special exception that yes, they are. They just have to print me one that I can eat.
And Chris is asking, is there a prize for best failure? We don't have a designated prize, but I suspect we can come up with something for best failure.
Absolutely. If anyone would like to sponsor in addition to our current sponsors, we are open to additional sponsorships. Our ultimate goal is we would like to be able to award prizes through 5th place in both competitions. Right now, that won't be the case, but if we do get, I have some messages out to some other potential sponsors waiting to hear back from them. But if you are watching and you would like to sponsor the competition, we'll have a place at the F3DPCH booth to put any of your business cards, pamphlets, whatever, even if you want to display some product there. We'll have a place there for you to get some advertisement, as well as mention on the Friday night 3D printing community hangout streams. and during the live stream as well. We want to thank our sponsors in every way possible. So I'm going to allow the platform use, and our sponsors will definitely get time to come over and talk to those watching the live stream as well, and show off their product. Anything else for that, Paul?
I don't think so. I will be having more things as we're getting very close to Earth now. We'll have more things coming out soon about just the logistics of how it'll work, right? Yep. Where to go, how everything's gonna go down. But yeah, that'll be all coming out like in the next week or so. And we'll have flyers, Friday for all the exhibitors who are going to be there, who have printers that can print. We'll have flyers describing the event and what to do. So if anybody wants to get on the ball Friday night and slice a benchy, they can do that.
Absolutely. So yeah, keep posted. Follow Paul on Twitter as well as at F3DPCH for the Friday night hangouts to see more details. F3DPCH is on Twitter and as well as Instagram. So keep an eye out both places for more information and as we kind of finalize everything for the contest. All right. Thanks, Paul. Usually I got questions during the stream that I didn't have an answer for because we didn't come up with an answer yet. So I figured having you on is a good time to take advantage of it. All right. Well, with that said, it is after the 2-hour mark. So let's go ahead and run through outros. If anybody has questions for any of our presenters that they'd like to stick around, please let us know quick in the chat, and we'll see if they can stick around to answer some more questions. I know I said we'd try to get back to Aaron about the photogrammetry rig. For anybody who's catching in late, if Aaron's able to stick around for a little bit longer, we'll ask some questions after the outro. But let us know in the chat if there's anybody specific you'd like to talk to. So let's go ahead and Jake, why don't you do your outro?
So if you want to see my videos, I have them up on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/MakerJake. I also post a lot of my 3D renders and 3D prints on my Instagram page, and you can follow me on Twitter at PeeWeeJedi.
Okay. Thanks, Jake.
Welcome.
And you will be at Earth.
I will be at Earth.
All right. As you guys are doing your outro, I think it's pretty clear all of us will be at Earth, but go ahead and let everybody know that if you're going to be there. Next up, we've got Aaron.
Yep. So follow me at TD3D Studios on Twitter. That's the best way to keep in touch right now. And come see me at Earth and let's talk. We can talk scanning or printing. And one of the things I like to talk about, we were talking about the print surfaces a little bit earlier. I got kind of a little bit of a somewhat unique print surface that I haven't seen a lot of people use, but actually print on the laser transparency sheets. I've actually got one sheet that I've been printing on now for about 2.5 years on the same sheet. Cost me about 30 cents and get great adhesion and release is real easy.
Cool.
And I'll have a printer there showing that off as well.
Neat. That's the first I've heard of that.
Yep. Works great and super cheap.
Awesome. All right. Next up, we've got Adam. When I add him back into the list. There you go. Now you're at it.
Hey, I'm back. You can find us at our website at Powerbelt3D or on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter at Powerbelt3D. We will be at Buffalo Mini Maker Fair next Saturday and then at Earth as well.
All right. Thanks again, Adam. Next up, we've got Sean. I kicked him out. There we go. Now you're back. You're muted.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? All right.
That was the best outro you ever gave.
Everybody can't hear me. As long as you can see my face.
Yep, there you go.
So my name is Sean. You can find me on YouTube at Sean Anigans. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter as ArtMods or ArtMods Official. And yep, that's it.
Okay. And you'll be at Earth.
Oh, I'll be at Earth I'm the community manager at PO Poly. So come stop by the PO Poly booth, check out what we're showing there, and come say hi.
Okay. Thanks, Sean.
Yep.
Next up, we've got Martin.
Yeah, hi, I'm Martin, and I have a channel on Twitter, username 3DP Iceland. Can be found there. I'm pretty active on Twitter and YouTube as well, doing all sorts of videos regarding 3D printing. I will be at Earth as well. I will have a table there somewhere, and will be bringing over some landscapes that I've been printing out and painting. We'll be giving those out to several people. Yeah, and so I look forward to see you at Earth. See you on Twitter and YouTube as 3DP Iceland. As my logo here is with a quote, I'm just here for my cat. My cat is normally in my videos, and he's like the star of the show. I'm just extra.
Martin, will you be hanging out at the F3DPCH booth again this year somewhat?
Yeah, somewhat. I will have a table. I'm not sure where I will get a table, but I will have my landscapes at my table, and then I will be all around. I will try to not sit at the table the whole event.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Martin. And that brings it back around to me. So you can find me youtube.com/howidoit, on Twitter @countrycowboy, and of course every other Friday here on F3DPCH. One thing I did forget to mention at the beginning of the stream, Martin, for a little over a year, was organizing the European version of F3DPCH that happened on the weeks that the US stream didn't happen. Martin has stepped aside from doing that for now. It may come back again. Organizing the streams is kind of difficult from time to time, and getting guaranteed participation can sometimes be a little bit difficult. But we're going to definitely continue the US streams, and Martin will be back on the US streams as he is tonight, and actually was the last stream too. So you can keep watching the US streams. The next one on October 4th at 10 p.m. Again, we don't have a guest to announce just yet. I am working on lining one up for that stream. I reached out to Caleb Kraft, who was previously with Make Magazine and is now with Make Community, which is more or less the rebirth of Make. The organizers of Maker Faire New York, Maker Faire Bay Area. Reached out to him to see if they would be interested in coming on the stream to talk about what they're looking at going forward. So that may happen for the October 4th stream. It might be a future stream. So I'm working on that. And if you would like to be a guest on the first stream of the month, go to f3dpch.com. And at the top, I forget what the direct link is, but at the top there is a link for guest suggestions. People from the community can go on there and suggest a guest as well. Or if you'd like to be a guest, you can fill that out and let me know you'd like to be a guest. The next show and tell is October 18th at 10 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to register for the show and tells, f3dpch.com/show and tell. Fill that form out. You can pick which date you'd like to be on. You don't have to sign up for the 18th. You can sign up for one of the future streams as well. Fill that out and we will get back to you. Typically, I end up getting back to you the week of the stream, the month that you sign up. That is limited to 4 people. Just because of using StreamYard right now. Hopefully down the road I can find another solution and open that up a little bit more, or StreamYard opens it up. But for now it is limited to 4. So if you want to show something off or show an update to something you're working on, be sure to get in sooner than later on the submission for that. And we'd love to see what you guys are doing and show the community what it is that you're doing. So with that said, I'd like to thank all of our panelists tonight, or all of our presenters tonight, and also thank my co-hosts Sean and Martin for helping out, asking questions, paying attention to the chat. It's definitely a lot going on with the show and tells, and sometimes I get too involved in paying attention to what the presenters say. So thank you guys. Thank you everybody for coming on. Thank you to all of you in the chat. And if you do want to stick around here after the outro, we may keep going if there's more questions for our presenters. So thank you again, everybody. And I want to start ending the streams with, or ending the outros with the mission of why I'm doing the Friday night 3D printing community hangout. And that is to build the maker community through live streams. That's the whole point of the show and tells, is to expose more people to what everybody's up to and grow the community that we have online, and introduce more people into it and create a cool atmosphere for everybody to just come hang out and chat about what it is they like to do. So thank you everybody for joining. All right. Now that part's done, the long-winded part of things. Sean and Martin, did you guys see in the chat during that if there were more questions or not? I don't think I saw anything.
No,
Chris Riley joined.
Hey,
Yeah.
Chris Riley. There he is.
yeah, I
Chris,
don't see any more questions.
All right, and Jake said he's going to head out. So, Jake, if you want to say bye to everybody, go for it.
Bye.
Hi,
You
Jake.
guys that are
Thanks for joining, Jake. I'll get in touch with you about future streams.
Yeah.
All right. We can go to this format for now. So, I had more questions for you, Aaron. And I've forgotten what they were. It's the great thing for the host to do.
I had a question.
Go for it.
Have you actually tested for how synchronous the photos are?
I have to a degree, yes, and it's within. I mean, it's milliseconds. It's it's less than a second.
Do you know what the latency would be? Is it individual pies that are just like stragglers, or is it networks, cabling?
Honestly, I don't know. My guess is probably just the individual pies and just the script running on it, and that's just a guess. But I don't think it would be the network. It's an isolated network, so there's no other traffic on it. This is the only traffic. I don't think it's a gig. It's 100 meg out to most of them, to the pies. The PC's running at, and the NAS box is running at 100 or at a gig. But the pies are running at 100 meg. But like I said, with it being isolated, no other traffic, I don't think it's a network.
Yeah, it's a broadcast message that initiated.
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if it's a broadcast message, every pie should get the message at this exact same time. So if there's a time difference, it's execution on the pie.
Right.
But, I look forward to see your regular.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see this because 3D scanning is something that I've thought constantly about. And Aaron, you actually had mentioned about, small scale, you can put something on a turntable and rotate it, or it's easy to rotate around.
Right.
I think it's out in my garage. I actually built a human-size Lazy Susan.
Yeah.
Because of that exact reason. Eventually, when I got around to it, what I was going to do is have a stationary Xbox 360 Connect and have the turntable slowly rotate a few times and then change the angle of it and all that. But the logistics of turning a human-sized Lazy Susan, a bit difficult.
Yeah.
I'd probably be pushing the same investment you have in your rig just to turn the table.
Right. Well, the nice thing about, when I first started this, it was one of those designs where, it can grow over time. So, I started off the prototype I did, which wasn't doing the full body, it was just doing kind of like your front torso. I started off with, I think 12 or 15 pies, and my initial goal was to get to 50 for the full body and eventually get to the 100 cameras. But my goal was just to kind of grow that slowly over time. Well, I kind of lucked into a situation. There's a company down the road here called RCBI that they have a program where they work with startups and they have they call early stage funding for startups involving manufacturing or technology. So I had, and consequently, they also have the kind of like the only local makerspace that we have here. So I had known some of the guys through attending they call it the Maker Vault, because it's actually an old bank building. So the actual makerspace is inside the old bank vault. So it's called the Maker Vault. But working with those guys there, they had introduced me to this program and convinced me to put in the application. I did, and got my initial application was approved, and then I had to go before them and do a kind of like a Shark Tank style presentation to them. And they actually accepted, and you can get up to a $10,000 award in services and money and things to them. So I actually won the award a couple months ago from them. So that was been a big help. So I was able to use that to kind of speed things along and get all 100 cameras and get them all up and running.
What I know you had mentioned the prospect for photogrammetry rigs are, it's not like you can call up any photographer and have a photogrammetry scan done, and that was kind of some of the inspiration to creating it. What made you choose to settle on using the Raspberry Pis and the cameras?
Before I'd really gotten into 3D printing, I tinkered a lot with, in the makerspace with Arduinos and Pis. So I just had a lot of familiarity with it. Had a lot of Pis laying around for different projects. So when I started off with my, prototype, I had 10 or 15 Pis laying around, so I didn't really have to buy anything for it. Then went out and bought me some PVC piping to kind of make a frame to hold all of it. So yeah, it just familiarity with the Pis and the relative low cost and being able to, overall, yeah, the whole project was expensive, but being able to, if you got an extra, $50 laying around or something, going out and, buying the equipment to throw another unit on there. So.
Yeah. Do you have a goal in mind for a total number of cameras, or is 100, do you think?
Yeah, 100 covers it pretty well. Yeah, that's a pretty good number.
Okay. Martin,
yeah.
are you going to get something?
Yeah, I was thinking about, because you have the cameras around, like for a 6 feet person, how high is the rig to get the top of the head, so you don't get the Grand Canyon?
It's a little over. I think it's about a little over 7.5 feet, somewhere like that.
Yeah, so most people would be covered.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Martin's asking because Martin is very tall.
Do you have to adjust the cameras much depending on the size of the person?
No.
What have you used the rig for so far? Has it mainly been testing, or have you? I know you talked about like doing sports.
Yeah, no, it's only been testing up to this point. I'd hope to kind of be in production already, but yeah, I haven't got to that point. So it's been mainly just testing up to this point. I've not done any kind of official business with it yet. Yeah.
Okay. When people get their scans at Earth, will they? I know you said they're going to get an OBJ file after Earth.
Right.
If anybody wanted to process their own pictures, is there any way that they can get the collective group of pictures that were taken?
Yeah, that I'd be open to that. That wouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, it was a full set of images is roughly, it's a little shy of 500 megs. It's about 470 meg or something like that.
All right.
A set of images.
Cool. Sean, do you have any more questions for Aaron? I don't want to, Aaron, if we're keeping you too late, tell us.
Yeah, I'll have to go here soon. I got ball games I got to get up early in the morning for.
Yeah, I'm actually
I'm gonna get going myself.
Yeah. All right. One last question. What software do you use to do the photogrammetry? I know we answered that earlier,
Yeah.
but Mitch is coming in
Mitch
late.
stepped in. Yeah, I'm mainly using Metashape from Agisoft. The other one that I kind of like, but I'm not as familiar with it yet, is Capturing Reality. There's some of the features I like in it, but I'm not as familiar with it yet. I haven't. Supposedly, you can get better results out of it, but I've not been able. Myself, I've not been able to get the better results out of it yet, just because I'm not as familiar with the software.
Have you tried Meshroom at all?
I have not. No.
All right. That's one. It's a freeware. Well, I believe it's open source. I was using it with my DJI Phantom. I had it flying over the campground we stay at.
Yeah.
Doing closer than aerial photos and landscape. Right. Had that doing that, and every time so far it's crashed out. I didn't have enough data from the drone, even though I flew like an hour and a half with the drone. Just let it up there flying around in a grid, capturing pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you messed around with that at all or not. I haven't seen a lot of people mention it or using it too much online. It's hard to find information on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried it a little bit when it came out, and I wasn't really happy with it.
So Agisoft seems to be the go-to.
Yeah, like I said, one thing that's interesting with the Capturing Reality, previously it's always been a little bit cost prohibitive too, especially if you just want to play around with it. But they actually just recently introduced it's like a pay per scan model where you basically get the software and you can run it full featured, all the way down to exporting the final model. And when you export that final model, you basically buy credits, and you pay for depending on how many images you have. I ran the numbers on it one time. So like for my 100 camera system, if I was doing the pay per scan model with them, it cost me like, I want to say it was like $2 or something in that range to actually export that final model. So if it's something you're not going to do a lot of and you want the full features, like I said, you can download the software. It's completely unlocked, full feature set. You can play around with it, add cameras and so forth, and then pay at that final time when you're ready to export it, and pay $1 or $2 for 100 cameras. Really isn't too bad.
All right. Cool. And I'll ask one last question, then we'll get out of here. NAC 3D Designs, Carl asked, how much do we have to bribe you in order to get our files before you leave?
I'll be able to do a few. So maybe if he gets time to hit me up on Friday evening or something, and I can do the scan and then process it back at the hotel or something.
I can just see Carl trying to get his files on Saturday morning so he can run the White Knight and print a large version of himself on the White Knight.
Yeah, that would be quite funny. He could do a life-size print almost.
Oh, that would be so funny. And the White Knight is tall enough. What is that? I think it's 300 or 400 in height that he can print. So he could probably print a pretty decent size.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Aaron, I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you sticking around for a couple more questions here at the end. Can't wait to see the rig, and I told you beforehand, I'm bringing my daughters to get their scan done, because this is the best way to get a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old to stand still. Freeze them in time.
Yeah. Well, follow me there. I'll actually be up. I won't be down on the main show floor. I'm actually going to be up on the mezzanine level. I don't know if were you at Earth last year? Yep. So you're familiar with the venue then. Yeah, I'll be up on the mezzanine level.
Okay.
Chris was just worried about with the space and potentially a lot of people wanting to kind of queue up to get scans or something. We thought that being up on that mezzanine might be a little better. So yeah, just find me up there.
How long do you think somebody will, from the time they walk in till the time they walk out of the rig, how long do you think that'll be?
I mean, basically, I want to take down their name and email, contact information. As soon as I put that in there, step in there, hit the scan button. I'll look at the little preview just to make sure, if they weren't, the facial expression. One of my previews is the camera that's like, closest to the face, just to make sure the facial expression stuff's okay. So you're, at a couple minutes, really, probably. I mean, it's not going to be long.
Quick turnaround. Cool.
Yeah.
If you're at Earth, definitely hit up Aaron. I mean, normally getting these done, Aaron said that it might be like $15, and don't hold him to that yet because it's not a set in stone to get the model, but that's cheap compared to almost any of the 3D full body 3D scans.
Yeah.
And photogrammetry is, from my understanding, photogrammetry is basically the best way to get a good quality scan. So definitely hit Aaron up. Aaron, thank you again.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
So, all right, everybody, have a good night, and we will see you again on October 4th at 10 p.m.